No one remembered when the last message had gone out, only that it had never been answered. The alien research station Kepri 9 drifted at the edge of dead space, where stars thinned and signals faded into static. For over 2 centuries, it had circled a dying blue giant, broadcasting a weak emergency beacon that no one bothered to trace anymore. To the greater galaxy, Kepri 9 was already a tomb. Inside, the survivors waited. They were not soldiers. They were scientists, archivists, and engineers from 6 different species, all bound by a forgotten joint research charter that no empire claimed responsibility for anymore. Their food was recycled dust. Their power came from systems older than most civilizations still alive. Their hope had worn so thin that even despair felt like wasted effort. Director Selrix, a tall, 4-armed Kthalan with translucent skin, floated near the central viewport. His species could survive low gravity better than most, but even he felt the ache in his joints. Outside the glass, space stretched endlessly, cold, quiet, uncaring. Life support projection, he asked softly. Technician Maura Venn, a biped with bronze-toned plating instead of skin, checked her console. The numbers flickered like they were embarrassed to exist. 36 hours, she replied. If nothing else fails first. No one reacted. They had passed the point where bad news changed anything. The station had once been a marvel. Kepri 9 was built to study pre-collapse ruins scattered through dead space, evidence of civilizations erased so thoroughly that even their enemies forgot their names. That research had frightened the wrong people. Funding vanished. Military escorts were recalled. Then one quiet cycle, the station's jump array failed in a way that should not have been possible. Sabotage. They sent distress calls anyway. At first every hour. Then every day. Then once a cycle, out of habit more than belief. The galaxy did not answer. Selrix turned from the viewport and addressed the remaining crew gathered in the central hub. There were only 9 of them now. Once, there had been 57. We will record a final archive, he said. If anyone ever finds this place, they will know we did not vanish quietly. Archivist then, a small avian-like being wrapped in thermal cloth, activated the recorder. A dim amber light blinked on. This is Kepri 9, Selrix began. Joint Research Station under obsolete Charter Code Theta 7. We were abandoned. Not because we failed, but because we learned too much. The station shuddered slightly as another subsystem shut down. Maura swallowed. Director, the beacon just changed frequency. Selrix turned sharply. That's impossible. No, Maura said slowly. It didn't fail. Something else locked onto it. For the first time in years, the station sensors screamed instead of whispered. An object had emerged from faster-than-light travel less than 1 light-minute away. Massive. Angular. Fast. The screen filled with a silhouette that did not match any known design language in the Galactic Index. No flowing hulls. No ornamental spines. Just layered armor, exposed radiators, and weapon mounts that made no attempt to look elegant. A ship built to survive. Then's feathers puffed in shock. That configuration. I don't recognize it. Maura's hands shook as data poured in. Power output is absurd. That vessel could flatten a cruiser group by itself. Selrix felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Identify origin, he ordered. The console paused, then displayed a translation packet. Earth Alliance. Deep-range warship. Designation. HS Vanguard. Status. Active. Silence swallowed the room. Humans. Maura whispered. Out here. Humans were new. Dangerous in a quiet, unpredictable way. They ignored traditions, rewrote physics when it inconvenienced them, and expanded without asking permission. The Council had labeled them probationary, a polite word meaning contained. And yet one of their warships now drifted between Kepri 9 and the endless dark. A transmission punched through the station's failing comm array, raw and clear. This is Commander Elias Rowe of the human exploration ship Vanguard, a calm voice said. Unidentified station. Your distress beacon is 200 years old. If anyone is alive in there, you're not alone anymore. Mora dropped into her seat. Then let out a broken sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. Selrix closed all four of his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, his voice was steady, but only just. "This is Director Selrix of Research Station Kepri 9, he replied. "We did not expect anyone to answer." Ro's voice came back immediately. "Yeah," he said. "We get that a lot." Docking clamps locked onto the station with a force that made ancient metal groan. Human boarding teams moved fast, cutting through sealed corridors, carrying portable life support units and emergency power cells like they had done this 100 times before. Lieutenant Hannah Okoye, helmet tucked under her arm, was the first human Selrix ever saw in person. She was smaller than he expected. No scales. No plating. Just fragile skin and eyes that missed nothing. "You're in rough shape," she said, already scanning him. "But you're gonna make it." Selrix studied her face. "Why are you here?" Hannah paused. "Because your signal was still broadcasting." "That is not an answer." She smiled faintly. "For humans, it is." Behind her, the Vanguard loomed through the viewport, scarred, asymmetrical, bristling with weapons and antennas. Not a symbol of conquest. A declaration. Someone, somewhere, had wanted Kepri 9 erased. Forgotten. Silent forever. They had not counted on humanity. And as emergency power flooded the station for the first time in centuries, Selrix realized something terrifying and wonderful at the same time. The silence had been broken. And the galaxy was about to regret who answered it. The first thing the survivors noticed was warmth. Not artificial heat bleeding through failing vents, but real, steady warmth carried by human power cells flooding Kepri 9's dead systems. Lights flickered back on across the station, harsh at first, then stabilizing into a soft white glow. For beings who had lived in shadow for decades, it felt unreal. Director Selrix sat strapped into a human medical chair aboard the Vanguard, surrounded by quiet efficiency. Humans moved with purpose, but without panic. They spoke softly, joked quietly, and worked like saving dying strangers was just another task on a long list. Commander Elias Rowe stood behind a transparent display, arms crossed, eyes locked on a tactical projection of the region. "This station wasn't just abandoned," he said calmly. "It was erased from the map." Lieutenant Hannah Okoye nodded. "Navigation records don't even acknowledge this sector anymore. Someone went out of their way to make sure nobody came looking." Selrix listened, absorbing every word. "That aligns with our conclusions," he said. "Our research threatened existing power structures." Rowe finally turned to face him. "What exactly did you find?" Selrix hesitated. Old instincts screamed at him to stay silent. The Council punished truth harshly. Entire species had vanished for less. But these humans had crossed forbidden space to answer a call no one else would. "We found proof," Selrix said slowly, "that advanced civilizations did not vanish naturally. They were removed." Rowe's expression didn't change, but the room felt heavier. Removed by who? By those who now sit at the top of the Galactic Council. Silence followed. Not disbelief, calculation. Humans were good at that. Before Rowe could respond, alarms cut through the calm. "FTL signatures," a sensor officer called out. Multiple contacts dropping in, fast. The tactical display flared to life. 6 ships. Sleek. Familiar. Council enforcement fleet. Hannah swore under her breath. "They tracked us." Rowe didn't move. Of course they did. The incoming transmission hit before anyone could block it. A tall, angular alien filled the main screen, metallic markings etched into pale skin. His eyes carried no curiosity, only authority. "This is Executor Vaughn of the Galactic Council," the alien said. "Human vessel Vanguard, you are in violation of restricted space statutes. Power down and prepare to surrender the station and its occupants." Selrix felt his secondary heart seize. "They came to finish us," he whispered. Rowe stepped forward into the camera's view. "Negative," he said calmly. "We responded to a distress call. These beings are under Earth Alliance protection. Vaughn's eyes narrowed. Humans are not authorized to interfere in council matters. Rowe tilted his head slightly. Funny thing about humans, we don't ask permission to save lives. Weapons systems across the council fleet powered up in unison. Hannah leaned toward Rowe. Sir, they outnumber us 3-1. Rowe nodded. I know. Selrix watched, confused. Then why do you not retreat? Rowe glanced at him. Because if we leave, they die. The vanguard surged forward, not away. Human engineers rerouted power with reckless precision. The ship's hull plates shifted, exposing systems no council database recognized. Massive capacitor banks charged, humming with barely restrained energy. Deploy Ghost Net, Rowe ordered. Space twisted. For a fraction of a second, the vanguard vanished, then reappeared in 6 overlapping sensor echoes, each broadcasting identical mass and energy signatures. Council targeting systems stuttered. What is happening? Executor Vaughn snapped. Electronic warfare spike, one of his officers replied. Their ship is everywhere and nowhere. The first council volley fired blindly. The vanguard didn't dodge. It absorbed. Armor flared white-hot, then cooled. Human shields didn't deflect energy, they drank it. Rowe's voice was steady. Return fire. Non-lethal, for now. Human rail cannons thundered. Not elegant beams, but raw kinetic force. Council ships reeled as armor buckled under impacts no shield protocol was designed to stop. Selrix watched in stunned silence. They fight like predators, he murmured. Hannah shook her head. No. We fight like survivors. A council frigate spun out of formation, engines crippled but hull intact. Another lost weapons control as electromagnetic pulses fried its systems. Executor Vaughn's composure cracked. You will regret this, he hissed. The council will not tolerate defiance. Rowe leaned closer to the camera. Get used to it. Then everything changed. A new signal appeared, ancient, massive, awakening. The station's core began to resonate. Selrix felt it immediately. His species was sensitive to harmonic fields. The artifacts, he breathed. They're reacting. What artifacts? Rowe asked. Selrix's voice trembled. The ruins we studied, they were not just records. They were warnings. And now they've detected you. Space around Kepri 9 rippled. The council ships froze, not by force, but fear. Sensors screamed again, but this time even human instruments struggled to translate what they saw. Something old was watching. Rowe straightened. All hands, pull back from the station. Defensive posture. Selrix looked at him, realization dawning. You didn't just answer our distress call, he said. You triggered something the galaxy buried. Rowe smiled grimly. Yeah. That happens a lot when humans get involved. Behind them, the void stirred, ancient systems waking after millennia of silence. And for the first time since the council rose to power, they were no longer the most dangerous beings in the dark. The vibration wasn't violent. That was what frightened everyone. It was smooth, controlled, and deep, like the slow breath of something that had been asleep for a very long time and had finally decided to open one eye. Instruments aboard the Vanguard struggled to assign numbers to it. Frequencies folded into each other. Time stamps jittered, then corrected themselves. Commander Elias Rowe stood perfectly still, watching space misbehave. Report, he said quietly. Lieutenant Hannah Okoye swallowed. The station isn't generating the signal. It's translating it. Selrix felt his membranes tighten. That is impossible. The artifacts were passive. They were dormant, Hannah replied. Big difference. Across the void, the council fleet had stopped firing. Ships drifted out of formation, their commanders no longer pretending control was absolute. Executor Vaughn appeared on the comm again, but now his voice lacked its earlier sharpness. Unknown anomaly, Vaughn said. All vessels hold position. Rowe muted the channel. He sounds scared. He should be, Selrix said. This technology predates the Council by millions of cycles. Mora Ven, now stabilized and strapped into a human crash seat, leaned forward. Director, we never decoded the final layer. We assumed it was damaged. Selrix closed his eyes. It wasn't damaged. It was locked. The space beside Kepri 9 folded inward, not collapsing, not tearing, but parting, like water pushed aside by something rising slowly from below. Light bent around the shape that emerged, not reflecting but avoiding it. A structure revealed itself. Vast. Angular. Covered in symbols that hurt to look at too long. The Vanguard's AI broke its usual silence. Commander, it said carefully, I am detecting a non-hostile intelligence. It is evaluating us. Ro exhaled. Of course it is. Selrix stared at the thing the galaxy had erased from history. That is a Sentinel archive. Hannah frowned. That sounds comforting. It is not, Selrix replied. It is a judge. The Sentinel spoke, not with sound, but with meaning. The message bypassed translators and settled directly into thought. Observers detected. Technological lineage. Human. Status. Unregistered. Mora gasped. It knows them. Ro felt pressure behind his eyes but didn't look away. Tell it we're explorers. Selrix shook his head slowly. It does not ask questions to learn. It asks to decide. Executor Varn broke the silence, his image flickering with interference. Ancient construct, he said carefully. The Council invokes Protocol Obsidian. Stand down. The Sentinel did not acknowledge him. Instead, it turned its attention fully toward the Vanguard. Humanity. You are not in the records. Explain. Ro stepped closer to the viewport, hands clasped behind his back. We don't always show up where we're expected. Selrix stared at him in disbelief. You cannot speak casually to it. But the Sentinel paused. Statement analyzed. Consistent with observed data. Hannah blinked. I think it likes you. Selrix whispered, that is worse. The Sentinel continued. Previous civilizations failed this interface. They sought control. They were erased. Executor Varn's voice sharpened with panic. Construct, the Council. The Council is a known variable. Corrupted. Expired. The word hit harder than any weapon. Council ships began backing away. Ro spoke again. What happens now? The Sentinel's attention remained fixed on the humans. A test. Every human system flared at once. Simulations flooded the Vanguard's processors, disaster scenarios, ethical dilemmas, impossible choices. Save one world or 10. Sacrifice a crew to prevent a war. Abandon allies to survive. Hannah grabbed the console. Sir, it's accessing our historical data. Ro nodded. Let it. Selrix watched, stunned, as centuries of human conflict, failure, and triumph streamed into the ancient intelligence. Why show it your worst moments? He asked. Ro didn't hesitate. Because they're part of who we are. The Sentinel paused longer this time. You fail often. You adapt faster. Council ships powered weapons again in desperation. Varn shouted, destroy the human vessel now. Before. The Sentinel moved. Not toward the humans. Toward the Council fleet. Space locked. Council ships froze as if pinned by invisible hands. Weapons died. Engines screamed and fell silent. Attempted manipulation confirmed. Verdict. Enforcement failed. A single pulse rippled outward. Not destructive. Selective. Every Council ship went dark. They did not explode. They simply stopped. Selrix felt his knees weaken. It judged them, unworthy. The Sentinel turned back to the Vanguard. Humanity. You do not seek dominance. You seek solutions. Ro rubbed his jaw. Sometimes we screw that up. Acknowledged. You try again. The structure began to withdraw, folding back into impossible angles. The silence was a filter. You passed. As it vanished, power surged through Kepri 9, stabilizing the station completely. Systems rebuilt themselves at the molecular level. The galaxy exhaled. Ro turned to Selrix. So, what exactly did we just win? Selrix laughed softly, a sound edged with awe and fear. The right to exist without permission. Hannah stared at the darkened council fleet. They're going to come back angry. Ro smiled. Good. Outside, humanity's warship held position, not as conqueror, but as proof. The galaxy had buried its greatest fear. And humanity had dug it up by accident. The council fleet drifted in silence, powerless and humiliated, while the vanguard remained exactly where it was. Commander Elias Rowe did not order pursuit. He didn't need to. The message had already been sent. Across known space, council observers, listening posts, and shadow relays had recorded what happened near Kepri 9. Ancient power had moved. Judgment had been passed. And humanity had stood at the center of it. Selrix watched the human bridge crew work, expecting celebration, fear, or pride. Instead, he saw focus. Planning. Preparation. Humans treated the collapse of galactic authority like a logistical problem that needed solving. That construct spared us, Selrix said quietly. It has never done that before. Ro nodded. It didn't spare us. It evaluated us. That is worse. Ro smiled faintly. Depends on your perspective. The Vanguard's long-range comm array activated, piercing layers of council censorship with raw signal strength. Across dozens of systems, ships paused, stations powered up dormant receivers, and species long used to obedience leaned closer to their screens. Ro stood before the camera. This is Commander Elias Rowe of the Earth Alliance, he said evenly. If you're receiving this, it means the Council no longer controls the conversation. The words alone were revolutionary. For centuries, distress calls went unanswered. Research stations vanished. Entire civilizations were erased quietly. Not by accident, but by design. Mora Ven watched the feed replicate across networks. They'll never forgive you for this. Ro shrugged. We're not asking them to. Selrix felt something stir among his people aboard the Vanguard. Not hope, resolve. The kind that came when survival was no longer a secret crime. Council response was swift. Within hours, fragmented commands arrived from surviving enforcement fleets. Threats. Accusations. Legal declarations that meant nothing without power behind them. Human analysts filtered them out. They're trying to reassert authority, Hannah said. Standard intimidation cycle. Ro leaned back. And it's not working. Reports poured in. Independent systems declaring neutrality. Trade coalitions refusing council oversight. Species long silenced beginning to speak, carefully at first, then louder. Selrix watched history tilt. They are afraid, he said. The Council's greatest weapon was inevitability. You shattered that. Ro's expression hardened. No. They shattered it themselves. We just stopped pretending it wasn't broken. But humanity wasn't finished. Deep within the Vanguard secured vaults, human scientists analyzed the Sentinel's residual data. Not the power itself, but the philosophy behind it. Fail. Adapt. Try again. Not perfection. Persistence. Sir, Hannah said later, we can't control what we've started. Ro nodded. I know. What if the Sentinel returns? What if it decides we're wrong? Then we'll deal with it, he replied. Same way we deal with everything else. Selrix studied him. You are not afraid of extinction. Ro met his gaze. We've already survived it. More than once. That was when the first counterattack came. Not fleets. Propaganda. Council-aligned networks flooded the galaxy with warnings. Humanity was unstable. Dangerous. A contagion of chaos. They blamed the Sentinel awakening on human recklessness. Claimed the ancient systems would destroy everything. Some believed them. Others remembered centuries of silence. When a mining colony near the rim sent out a distress call, ignored by the Council for days, the Vanguard answered within hours. Supplies delivered. Evacuation conducted. No demands made. Then another. Then another. Human ships multiplied, not as conquerors, but as responders. Engineers. Medics. Builders. Warships only when necessary. Selric stood aboard a newly powered Kepri 9, watching human drones repair ancient damage his people had lived with for generations. "They are following you," he said to Ro. Ro shook his head. "They're following the idea." That idea scared the Council more than weapons ever could. A final message arrived from Executor Varn, transmitted without encryption. "You do not understand what you are disrupting," Varn said, his voice stripped of authority. The Council maintained order. Ro replied calmly. "You maintained control. There will be war." Ro nodded. "Yeah, probably." The transmission ended. Silence followed, but this time, it wasn't empty. Selrix looked out at the stars, at ships moving freely where once only permission allowed motion. "What happens now, Commander?" Ro thought for a moment. "Now," he said. "Now we find everyone who was left behind." Beyond them, ancient systems stirred, not to judge, but to watch. The Sentinel had seen something new in humanity. Something it hadn't planned for. A species that didn't ask to rule. A species that refused to abandon. And as the galaxy adjusted to a future without invisible chains, one truth became impossible to ignore. Humanity wasn't rising to power. They were dismantling it. The Council did not surrender quietly. They never had. What remained of their authority gathered in secret, not in grand chambers or shining fleets, but in hidden systems far from public eyes. Old alliances were reactivated. Forbidden weapons unsealed. If control could not be maintained through fear, then it would be restored through force. Their final move was simple. Erase humanity. The first strikes came without warning. Human listening posts vanished in bursts of controlled annihilation. Civilian trade routes were ambushed. Not enough to provoke open war, just enough to test reactions. Commander Elias Rowe watched the reports arrive in silence. "They're probing," Hannah said. "Seeing how far they can push." Selric stood beside them, his posture rigid. This is how it always began. Quiet removals. Plausible deniability. Rowe nodded. "Yeah. We figured." What the Council did not understand was that humanity had already planned for this. Earth Alliance channels lit up, not with threats, but with coordination. Independent species were warned in advance. Evacuation corridors opened. Human ships repositioned, not to defend territory, but to shield others. "They're protecting non-humans first," Moraven observed in disbelief. Rowe answered without looking at her. "If we only defend ourselves, we become exactly what they're afraid of." The Council's final fleet emerged 3 days later. Massive. Unified. Everything they had left. They jumped directly toward Earth-controlled space, confident in overwhelming force. They never reached it. Humanity did not meet them with a wall of ships. They met them with truth. Across every open channel, every shared network, every system still pretending neutrality, humanity broadcast everything. Records. Evidence. Testimonies. The erased civilizations. The manipulated wars. The Council's hidden executions. And then they showed the Sentinel's verdict. Not as a threat. As a mirror. Council fleets slowed as their own crews watched the truth unfold. Orders hesitated. Some ships powered down. Others broke formation and fled. Executor Varn appeared one last time on an open channel, his voice raw. "You think this makes you saviors?" he demanded. "You've unleashed chaos." Rowe answered him calmly. "No. We unleashed choice." The Council fleet fractured. The battle never came. Some Council ships fired anyway, old habits dying hard. Human warships intercepted with precision, disabling weapons, not annihilating hulls. Boarding teams moved in, offering surrender instead of execution. Selrix watched it happen, stunned. You could have destroyed them. Ro's voice was quiet. They expected that. As the last Council command vessel went dark, not destroyed but captured, the galaxy crossed a line it could never uncross. The Council was finished. Not replaced. Finished. In the weeks that followed, something unprecedented happened. Species met without permission. Trade flowed without tribute. Research resumed without fear of disappearance. Old borders softened, then dissolved. Kepri 9 became a symbol, not of tragedy, but survival. Selrix stood once more by the viewport where he had once waited to die. Now ships passed regularly, lights bright, engines strong. You changed everything, he said to Ro. Ro shook his head. No. We just answered the call. Selrix smiled softly. That was enough. Far beyond known space, the Sentinel observed. It did not interfere. It did not judge again. For the first time since its creation, it had nothing to erase. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy, had not ruled it, had not reshaped it through force. They had done something far more dangerous. They had reminded it what cooperation looked like. And in doing so, they became something the galaxy had never prepared for. Not a weapon. Not a threat. But a species that refused to look away when the universe whispered for help. The silence was gone. And this time, humanity was listening.